I can't see everybody on the line, but I would like to welcome everybody to this third Women for Nature Community of Practice webinar for 2021 on career planning. My name is Janet Bax, and I'm a co-advisor on the Women for Nature mentorship, and I have to say that I've been here since the beginning, and it's so great to see the progress and to see where we are today. And I'm here with my co-moderator, Christy Pettit from Pollinate Networks. And today we've got the privilege of welcoming our two panelists, Mary Granscu and Tara Topping, whom Christy will introduce in just a moment. This is the last of the three webinars, and if you missed the first or second, you can certainly check them out. They've been recorded and they're on the Women for Nature mentorship platform, or you can access them through Nature Canada's website. As I said, today's topic is about career planning, which was one of the most popular topics requested and of interest, voted on by you, the mentees, in our survey. I'd like to take a moment just before we get started on the formal part, or nothing's going to be formal today, but on the panel presentation, to give thanks to our sponsors, without whom this would not be possible: the Chalkers Foundation, the Government of Canada, RW and Company, the Women for Nature donors, and of course, everybody from Pollinate Networks. Christy, we're just so appreciative. And I'd like to also thank Jody Joy and Shazira for their incredible work, Lauren Stellman for her support and work. You've done a lot to support me, I know. Without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Christy, who is going to introduce today's panel members. So over to you, Christy.
Thank you very, very much, Janet, and for all your work. And I also want to recognize Nora Livingstone, who's here on the phone too, and has been along for many a committee meeting or many a planning meeting on these very topics that we're gathering to talk about today. It is an absolute privilege to be supporting conservation in general, and particularly focusing women's efforts to build careers, projects, empires that will help us into the future and envision the future as we go forward. So we're here to support each other, and these communities of practice that the team here and Jody Joy has really spearheaded have been really enriching for me personally. So I'm really thankful for that. I first learned of Mary Granscu when she was appointed the Kinross Chair in Environmental Governance at the University of Guelph. So Mary, when was that? I can't conjure my mind when that happened.
It was 2018.
2018.
Yeah.
And so Mary to this day is still providing executive coaching at the university. And Mary draws on over 30 years of experience in partnerships, government relations. I heard when I did some digging on you, Mary, or I saw that you had some advisory services to the Prime Minister's office and various other very impactful places, and obviously have been a leader in conservation and in sustainability, worked across all kinds of sectors, for-profits, not-for-profits, and so on. So we're super excited to have the benefit of your experiences, particularly gathering up some of the learnings and lessons we had from last time. We talked last time a lot about networking and how to create partnerships and how to stay sane through it all and how to do those things. And I know that's part of career pathing too, and that will be something I know you're inherently good at and know a lot about. And we also are really fortunate to have Tara Topping with us today. And Tara is an educator and has been in conservation, ecology, sustainability for many years in many forms. And so the forum that I met Tara Topping in was when she was leading up the creation of career development programs at Project Learning Tree, which is an initiative of the Strategic Forestry Initiative. And so Tara was doing all kinds of things to help people really get a grip on their careers. And Tara, I think you and I just started working on a few collaborative things. You were doing many more when the pandemic started. So there was a whole section of Tara's world that went, in this instance of her career, from career planning to sort of crisis career planning for people who were trying to get work or trying to get through an onerous interview process and some kind of field experience when we were shut down. So it was a really interesting time in the trenches that I've had with Tara, but I was really inspired by all her amazing ideas and so on. And we're super blessed to have Tara here today because she is a frontline educator working with grade 9s and grade 12s in different conservation, environmental type programs that no doubt will come up through the course of our discussion today. And we really, really value the fact, Tara, that you are hands-on and you are a visionary, but you also are working with this constituent of people that are, you know, working their way up into careers. So it's wonderful to have you here as well.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, for sure. So let's jump right in. The way that we work these sessions, we want to make them as interactive as possible, but also use the time as wisely as we can. So we're going to work through a series of questions with having each of the panelists address the questions. You can put questions in the chat. Amy is running the show for us, so she's listening along at all times. Should you be having difficulties, just pop something in the chat. If you want to have back channel chat at any point, obviously do that. So we are going to start with a question that you see on your screen. What advice can you provide for turning a young person's interest in nature and the environment into a viable career option? And I love this question because I think that we are all sort of in this position of wanting to fan those flames. So Tara, I'm going to start with you. What have you seen that has, you know, when people have a passing interest, how do you make that more? And that might be a young person or it might be other interestees, but how do you see that happening?
Well, before I kind of get into advice, I just want to be really excited for all of the women on the call because I think it's such an amazing time to be pursuing a green job. They're there, they're everywhere, they're exploding, and it's going to be such a critical element to growing all different industries. We need to care about the environment, whether we are doing natural resource extraction or whether we are building a brand new insurance company in a downtown. Everyone has to consider the environment. And so what a cool time to be a woman pursuing this type of a career. So there's a place for you, and I want to emphasize that if you do the work and you seek out the opportunities, you're gonna find an incredible career that's gonna build your future and be able to create a life that you want. And that's gonna be a huge kind of reoccurring message when I am answering some of these questions is remember that you do get to choose, and that you get to choose the pathway and the career that is going to suit not only your interests and your skills, but also what do you want your life to look like. Some of us are going to pursue part-time, and some of us are going to pursue an outdoor career, and some of us are going to pursue indoor, and some urban and rural, and all of that is fine and important for you to recognize that that is what you want, and that you do deserve to have that, and you can work for that. So that's kind of just how I wanted to start, is that I'm so inspired by all of you who are starting off your careers, and you have all of these opportunities in front of you. And so that's kind of one of the things I wanted to say here in terms of advice is to really make sure that you keep those blinders off, because you don't know always where that dream job or dream career is going to come from. As the environment continues to play this role in different places, and the pursuit of natural care, we have opportunities. So it might come in a city design project. It might come in education or policy development, or places that you might not have ever expected yourself to fall into. And just to be open-minded and to explore some of those opportunities when it's presented. And the other thing is to be a little bit choosy and to consider those interests and the education that you've pursued, but also what are your previous experiences, and what do you just love to do, and make sure to include that when you're exploring those jobs, because again, just because our educational ticket says one thing, doesn't mean that we can't layer in some of those previous experiences or previous passions to really create a really rich job. So just may, and we'll talk about this a little bit more through some of the other questions, is just really diving into who are you and what kind of drives you and how can you pursue that, and then broadening your scope and just being aware of the type of worker you are going to be, I think is really critical, because not all of us are meant to work in an office, and not all of us are meant to work in field work. So understanding who you are, and being really true to that, I think is important.
Beautiful answer, Tara. I think so important. How do we turn people on to nature? Well, we turn them on to themselves, because,
Yeah.
the interest is there. And I love what you said about reflecting on the fact that, career conservation means a diversity of opportunities, a huge diversity of opportunities to find yourself in. I think that's really, really interesting. How about you, Mary? What would you say to the same question?
Yes, I'm going to pick up on some of the threads, Tara, that you laid down. But yes, I want to start this by talking about how, our play in nature when we were children helps us become leaders and problem solvers as adults. And every single leader, conservation leader that I've worked with or spent time with over the last 30 years, they all track back to those formational times in the woodlot behind their house, or on a pond, or by the ocean, or in my case, watching ants crawl across the sidewalk on the way to kindergarten. And so that's part of your power. And that really provides a wonderful foundation for the world we're in right now. The world we're in is changing, is dynamic, is in crisis, all of the above. And with it, there are opportunities that are opening up. And I agree with Tara that there are places. So I guess if I'm going to think about, what advice would I give? There's my top advice that I've given forever, throughout my entire career, and that is volunteer. That is the way to get experience, and that is a way to release some of your passions. And it always looks good on a CV. For all of those reasons. I mean, I started out volunteering and I was absolutely persistent. It was with World Wildlife Fund. It was 35 years ago. I was doing my master's degree and I didn't take no for an answer. They didn't have a volunteer program. So I just kept asking. And I got in, it turned into a job, and off you go. I really agree with being flexible, starting somewhere. The first role you have might not be your dream, but you put those stones in the river and you cross the river and get there. Every single experience has something of value to use, to draw on, to learn from, to strengthen your skills and challenge you. It really, I find a lot of it is attitudinal. What attitude you go into something with. I mean, I've had some really boring jobs. I've had mostly fascinating jobs. And it just comes with the territory, kind of drawing the pearls, and especially I find drawing on the people.
Say just a tiny bit more about that, Mary, and then we're gonna switch gears a little bit. Drawing on the people, what does that look like when you're thinking about
Well,
this?
I mean, you know, sometimes your first job isn't your first choice, but there are leaders there that you can learn from.
Gotcha.
And so you can take things that aren't necessary. They're the intangibles that really enrich experience. Even if it's going out for a beer with a colleague, or going for a walk, or, you know, finding ways to connect and learn.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
And it can lead to other connections.
it's true. It's true. Back to the L roads lead back to the network for sure. So we've kind of covered, you know, I love what you said, Tara, about that self-knowledge piece. And I love Mary, you recounting that childhood to get someone fired up, just bring them back to the joy they felt. And then this idea of, you know, blooming where you're planted and having some patience along the way. These are good philosophical places. I think, Janet, you're going to take us now to a more sort of practical idea with your question.
Yeah, so the first question is so interesting. How do you turn an interest into, you know, a viable career path? And the second question is, okay, and then what? How do you, what are some of the ways, what are some of the best practices in terms of mapping out a career plan? And Mary, why don't we start with you?
Well, I guess I would call it navigation. I work with students right now. I work with young entrepreneurs. I work with conservationists in the field, and some people, and knowing who you are. So some people develop and follow a plan or draw on a plan. Other people go on their gut as much as anything else. And often it's a combination. So, you know, what I would say about this is that there are passions you can lean into. There are skills and qualities and strengths that you can lean into whatever role you're thinking of. But there also are challenges. So some of the richest experiences are when you, and pardon my French here, but you know, I always have this motto. I've had this motto in my life. If it scares the bejesus out of you, it's worth doing. If it's scary, if you're not sure you can do it, those are some of the roles that are really worth taking. Everyone in this world, you know, doesn't come fully packed, you know, into a role. So it's really, I think for a lot of people, it's about finding the markers, finding the handholds. It's tough. It's tough out there to make your way. I mean, I feel that from the you know, the young professionals that I work with. It can be very confusing. So, you know, I think it's really a mix of your head, your heart, and your gut, and staying true to all of those.
Very, very interesting. And I mean, navigation implies being ready for the storms and being, you know, being agile, being flexible, being able to, you know, to use your term, navigate through all that and having the wherewithal to do that. And, you know, it's sometimes building those skills is very tough, while at the same time you're trying to make your way towards your goal, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And what are you made of? You know, each person is different, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's so many ways to open a door. And so really, I mean, Tara, I'm sure, you come across this a lot where kind of people figuring out, what's special about what they bring and how do they open doors? I looked for mentors, and I looked for challenge. And I looked for diversity. And so everyone's different. And it's just delightful how different people are in the way that they approach this.
Absolutely. So Tara, let's hear from you about this career plan mapping.
Yeah, I love that Mary talked about it being kind of a navigational tool, because I think that sometimes we can get really fixated on, I'm going to make this plan, this is the goal, these are the steps, and this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to get there, and it's going to be great. But when I was building the tool at Project Learning Tree Canada, I really wanted to make something that was really agile, because that's not very often the way life works.
Mm.
And so what I always suggest to people is make sure that you've got some of those the foundations there. So make sure you start with that knowledge of self, because when you're navigating, you always kind of want to play back to that. Is this going to work for me? Is this challenge going to work for me? How am I going to navigate this bumpy road ahead? And so that comes down to really knowing your own values. And if you haven't done a values assessment, which I believe probably most people going through mentorship have, do it. Just reflect on what is the most important thing for you, and and that allows you to make sure that you are steering your career and not being steered by social media, not being steered by a boss that you're working for currently. It allows you to really be the one that's doing that navigation. And I think that's really important, to make sure that we're pursuing those meaningful things for ourselves. And those values change. Our values before we've had uh, a family and children might be quite different later in life. So it's not good enough to do it once and then be like, okay, these are my values for the rest of my life. It's continuously assessing yourself throughout that career plan. So that's really important to me. And then not only that, but kind of having those core competencies, skills kind of established for yourself. Um, these are the things that I excel at, and I likely will always excel, because it's just who I am at my inner core. And I think when Mary was saying to like pursue those challenges or to seek those other opportunities, even if they're a bit above our heads, if we're getting to kind of utilize some of those core excellencies, we're probably going to do all right. We might have to acquire some new skills along the way, and do some networking and work with some leaders and work with some mentors, but we're going to be all right. So I think having those core competencies and just knowing at your kind of heart and soul who you are really helps to navigate in a really authentic way, and having that flexibility. And then, of course, if we're going to map out a career plan, I'm always talking to even my high school students, like, what can you do next, just to kind of like keep the juices flowing? Like, you're telling me that you really want to pursue this future career. Like, hey, why don't you try out a co-op, or why don't you try out a work placement, or um, uh, just a shadow, or even just some informational interviewing? Why don't you give someone a call and just try out and see what that place is going to be all about? And I think that building in some of those steps into your career plan are really critical, because I think it'll continuously help you to just like make those judgment calls when you come to some fork at the roads. You'll just have more information to play on, and just being really open-minded to know that the 5-step process to the dream job might not actually work out, and just kind of playing back on to those cores, and that having that flexibility to pursue different options is critical. And just one last thing before I turn it back over is that when we're thinking of a career plan, I think sometimes we get hyper focused on a career is just a job. I'm going to have this job when I get older, but our career is much bigger. The career kind of is that whole. It's all those educational opportunities. It's all of those side occupations and the side challenges and the volunteering. All of that kind of comes together to make up what is our career. And I loved when Mary was talking about the volunteering gives you that chance to pursue some of those passions and our interests, because we might not get to do all of it in our job. But we can be bigger than that job. We can kind of formulate this career. And so when we're coming up with our plan is how are we building that whole life, not just that dream job.
Very interesting. So I love the way that both of you talked about the navigational aids and what those aids might look like and what they comprise. I guess one of the things that I was expecting you to speak about in one of your answers was the importance of people. I know that in pandemic times, we've sort of been working on our own and we've been working from home, but in all of my jobs, I've found that it's always about the people. It's about the relationship between people. It's about how you can build on relationships, how you can use relationships. So I'd love to hear from both of you, and it doesn't have to be right now, it can be as part of your answer to the next question about that importance. I think what you've dwelt on is the importance of building up yourself and knowing who you are and knowing what your competencies are, what your values are, so that when you're sideswiped or when your navigation doesn't go quite as you expected, that you've got the wherewithal to be able to, straighten the boat or whatever it is that you're navigating. But I think people are really important, and how we use people on our way through our careers is really important too. Anyway, back to you, Christy, for question number 3.
For sure. And I think we've already started to hint at this with talking about, these side swipes, these things that happen, and the crossroads might be coming at people a little more frequently right now in this time and place. But as Jody was pointing out in the chat, it's really great to normalize the fact as both of our panelists here are that it's not a linear thing necessarily. It's not for most of us that we think, hey, I'm going to do that and it happens just like that. Not so often is that the case. So when we think about, one of the things Tara talked about is having those core, and I think Mary, you talked about this as well, having a sense of who you are and what your absolute priorities are, what your absolute values are. That can be one thing that we do as we approach a crossroad. What other things would you recommend people thinking about? And I mean, Janet, you sort of hinted at the people around you, and I think we've already talked a little bit about that, but what else would you say when we get to a crossroads? We know as much as we've tried to take Mary's advice and bloom where we're planted, we're not going to be able to stay where we are. We got to make a move. What else do we need to be thinking about? Mary, why don't you get us started there?
I think the first thing I would say is to know in your heart whether you're in a position at a crossroads, partly because of burnout. And that does happen a lot. And certainly in our, in our sector, with the pressures we're under, the global, local, and national, balls we're working to roll uphill. And back to Janet's point about the people is that when you come to a place like that and you're really valued where you're working, finding a way to work with the people around you that can support you to get to a better place, I would say is the first thing to think about. I've gone on retreats and I've had my board of directors when I was running a nonprofit under intense pressure. They supported and funded 2 retreats over a period of 7 years. And if I hadn't have had those chances to just like regenerate
Mhm.
physically, emotionally, spiritually, I would have had to, to exit. And so being able to do that, being able to regenerate, then, I guess I feel that you can then be in a better place to choose from a position of strength. When a time is to move, to shift, or not, or redesign your role. So I think that's the first thing I would say about that, and happy to get into a conversation about that.
I love that you're saying that, first of all, we're back to the navigation piece, but I really love the idea of, first of all, trying to locate yourself and where is this crossroads coming from? Is it an external thing or is it an internal thing? I think that's a really interesting way to think about it. And also then reminding ourselves of the choices we do have is pretty key. Tara, do you want to add something to that? And then we'll go back to Mary.
Yeah, I really love that, because I think sometimes we just have to take a breath. It may not be a crossroad at all. Like, we may just need to reground ourselves, but sometimes we do need to exit, and maybe that's choosing a new organization, or maybe it's choosing a new profession. And those, I think, are bigger crossroads, not bigger, but those are crossroads that kind of take us back to reassessing why and then where. And so I think if I can kind of jump off where Mary was, and I think she talked beautifully about readdressing some of those internal or crossroads. If we really are choosing a new direction, um, I think it's a great chance for us to reevaluate that whole kind of career pathway, and kind of start it. Who are we? Like, why do I need a change? What is it that's not being met in my current role, and therefore what do I need to pursue? And I know all of you have done a KTI, and I really love the KTI for kind of just creating that structure of who I am. What do I need from a workplace? What do I give to a workplace? And kind of looking at that, because I think when we know our own motivation type, it helps us to pivot that career. Do we just need do we need to shake it up? Do we just need a new space to work in with a new team? And that's a different pivot than this entire profession is not working for me. I need to re-educate and go somewhere else. And if you are at that crossroad, keep in mind that to kind of look back on the stepping stones you've already put behind you, and maybe the pivot to a new career isn't as complicated as getting an entire new education. Maybe it's reevaluating some of those transferable skills and transferable experiences that you already have, and then layering on a little bit more um, education, and then pivoting from there. So when you're at that crossroads, I think sometimes we can see them as this monumental toss up our life and start all over again, but I don't think it has to be so complicated. Um, Go back to who you are and where you want to go.
Yeah, that's great. So Mary, one last thing on this question for you, just in terms of where you sit and what you've seen. Back to the whole idea of people. When you started your remarks, and I think Tara's just one of the mentoring assessments that people do coming into the program. They give some information, then they do a KTI, which is a collaboration style assessment that tells you about your motivation and so on. You talked a little bit about really that self-knowledge piece in your first remarks. If we think about striking a partnership with someone that supports us along the way, what has that looked like for you? How do you sort of suss out who's going to be the best help to me in this crossroads situation?
First of all, yourself, and And I think what I'd go to is, and often I tell stories. So I had a role at the University of Guelph, and as part of that, I would talk about my life and work experiences. And I found an image that completely resonated, and that was the flight path of a peregrine falcon. It goes over here, it climbs, it descends, there's setbacks. And, when it's hunting, it has a huge range, and it's not linear, it's very lateral. So you can find power in finding an image and being proud of your path. And it can be snakes and ladders. It can be, there's so many different ways to think about it. So that, because sometimes it's like, why don't I know, is a fundamental question. So I guess, and, I'm kind of coming at this, but being open to someone you respect saying, why don't you come work for me? So I would say cultivate a community, and when you need them, your community will be there for you. Even if there's times where you're not sure, then maybe you head into a role more with your head, and then you figure out a way to lean into something more with your heart. And then, you dive in with everything because there's a perfect role out there for you. I would just say that draw on different parts of yourself, and, accept that for most people, some people it's more linear, and for a lot of people it isn't. Celebrate that.
Awesome. Thank you. Janet, back over to you.
Yes, well, thank you very much. Oh my goodness, we seem to have covered a lot, but Tara, we are going to go to you now and have you share your career planning expertise and cover some of the, maybe in more depth, or maybe cover new things, but certainly the importance of understanding one's own values, one's strengths, and finding a good fit. Or being comfortable in the fit that you have. I don't know how it goes, but anyway, over to you, and I look forward to your comments.
Thanks so much. And I just want to thank Jody Joy and Shazire and Christy for thinking of me. I giggled a little when Mary was talking about just trusting your network when they tell you you can do a job and you don't feel like you really can. It's kind of how I got here. I was put into the role of career education manager, and it was a real pivot from education. And I am so grateful that I did it, because my skills exploded in a year and a half, because I was working with people who believed in me, sometimes when I didn't necessarily believe in myself. And Christy can certainly be a testament to that from some of the conversations we had. But I agree, Mary, that sometimes others see these like inner fires and strengths that we don't see ourselves. So I do appreciate being invited today. And I wanted to bring some light to that career development model I worked on when I was with PLT Canada, but I also want to share some experience that I had this summer. I was working with an educational program from Kenjuintag on Manitoulin Island. So I was really blessed with the opportunity to hear from some elders who shared some teachings with me that I think really support the pathways that we're looking at today. And so I do want to share some of that. But before I begin, I do want to applaud all of you for being here, because you're already taking those first really powerful steps in your career by seeking out mentorship. So you're already looking to build that community of practice. And as Janet comes back to and Christy comes back to, surrounding yourself with those people who will help us in that navigation and help us to see that fire inside of us and help to connect us with opportunity, I think is just really critical. So As you're leaving the mentorship program, and I know that that is ending quite soon, hold on to some of those skills and those practices that you've been working on with mentorship, and continue to really foster and fuel that relationship with your mentor or some of the other women who you've met in your practice. I just think that surrounding yourself with those people moving forward will continue to build your experience. Um, because we know that when we choose good work, it can bring us up and it becomes a huge part of our identity. But when we choose work that doesn't work for us, it can crush us. And so we do really want to uh, navigate in a way that we are building the experiences that build us up. Even if it's not the right job, we want to be able to use it to support us, and give us strength. So some key tips that I have, before I dive into some of these learnings I have from the summer, is to listen to that inner voice. What did you want to be when you grew up? So Mary talked about those first experiences as children, and what just gave us so much joy and really fueled our passion. I think it's great for us to think back on that and like what was it about those experiences and how do we translate that into to some career development. Um, we're often better at listening ourselves as children. We talked about this at the very beginning of the call. Um, we don't doubt ourselves as much. We just we know who we are, and we know what we love, and we're not afraid to show it and to be it. And I think if we can capture a little bit that in our adult careers, it'll help us out. And respecting what is unique to you. You're going to hear that from me again, but um, in the world we live in right now, I think it's with social media, and there's a lot of pressures for success. I think we really need to make sure we're defining success for ourselves and doing our best to just kind of have that inner perspective versus being guided and steered by what are other people doing and calling success. Um, and that's a tough skill to do, and it requires kind of toning out the feelings that we get when we see other people. And I know that I am really guilty of this. I basically look at the best of everyone out there and be like, okay, this is who I'm going to be. um and that's a big expectation to live up to. So I would just challenge you to reflect, and to define yourself, by yourself. And to try new things, which has been a passing message. Don't underestimate that previous experience. I loved when Mary talked about it was attitudinal. I have worked for Parks Canada, and I was just in Banff, and I was visiting one of the sites that I was working on where I spent 2 summers with youth painting railings at Johnson's Canyon. And for days, we just painted railings. And then I would go back the next summer and we would repaint the railings. And I laughed a little at that experience because the relationships I built with the people I was working with during that time were fundamental. And so we need to honor those experiences and take what we can from them, whether they're the most inspiring experiences or not. Okay. So this summer, as I was reflecting on truth and reconciliation and bringing that into my educational practice, I listened to a couple of talks by Honorable Justice Murray Sinclair, and he poses these 4 questions. Where do we come from? Where are we going? Why are we here? And who are we? And when I heard the questions, it really resonated in terms of not only kind of grounding us in our places, but also when we're thinking about career pathway planning. I just think it's a really great place to start. When we think about where do we come from, honoring those roots and those childhood practices, honoring what were the experiences we had as children in our families, and what does that bring to our careers. Maybe we saw things the way our parents worked, the styles of life that they created because of their occupations. Maybe we loved it, or maybe we didn't love it. So that where do we come from, I think, can inspire where we're going. So then the next, where are we going? This is all about our plan and coming up with that structure and those stepping stones to navigate where we want to go. What route is going to work best for us? I think sometimes we can get stuck in that formal education pathway, but um, understanding the value of informal education and networking and volunteering, and just thinking about where do we want to live. There's some great tools I'm happy to share in terms of exploring living in rural spaces, and the cost of living in rural spaces, or the benefits of living in rural spaces. And I think sometimes exploring where we want to work is almost as important as what we want to do, whether it's what is the type of company I want to work for, or what is the setting of the company. So just allowing us to explore those questions. And then, why are we here and who are we? And so I spoke with an elder, or I was able to participate in some teachings from an elder, an Anishinaabe elder this summer. And he introduced me to the construct of the inner fire. And I kind of think, if I can leave you with one thing today, it's kind of thinking of your own inner fire. And Elder Josh talked about that inner fire being our passion, our drive, and our enthusiasm felt within a person when they discover their special calling and their path in life. Um, and that construct in the Anishinaabe teachings rests in the belief that all people are born with special gifts that must be cultivated and nurtured throughout childhood into early adulthood. And if this is done, the inner fire awakens and burns brightly, leading to the development of our strong learning spirit. Um, so he checked in with our inner fire during this teachings, and I want to kind of give you a chance right now to kind of think about, as you're looking into your career, is your inner fire burning bright, or is your flame a little low? Um, and I think, as Mary said, over our lifetime, it kind of can ebb and flow, but having that check in with ourselves, are the things we're doing in our career plan, because it's evolving, it's always changing, is it fueling our fire, or um, is it leaving us a little burnt out? Um, and our inner fire needs the flame, and that's our kind of our passion, and it burns when we honor our true self. And our inner fire needs oxygen. We have to take a breath. We have to slow down. So as you're exploring career planning, consider that concept and check in with yourself. And that inner fire is made up of our own unique bundles, and that's kind of where I was talking about thinking about yourself and your own identity and your own values and your skills and competencies. Okay, I think I'm getting the time check because I'm going to the next slide here. All right. So those 4 questions by Marie Sinclair kind of really, to me, kind of almost reflected this idea of a career development model. And there's lots of different versions of a career development model. I worked with a different one at PLT Canada, but this is kind of that basic one of knowing yourself, exploring your options, get focused, and take action. Um, and I think you've been working on some of this work within your mentorship program. But I think that it's a really good reminder. We learn about this kind of stuff in high school. I'm trying to teach students this, and we often aren't ready to hear it then. We're not quite sure, but as we're moving out into our career, um, I think it's really important that we set our structure up well. Our foundation is strong, and it's going to allow for us to really flourish. So that idea of knowing yourself, there's lots of different assessments you can do. But taking that assessment and then actually doing something with it is key. I've provided a website, excuse me, Alice. So if you haven't had a chance to explore some of those value plan or value assessments or interest assessments, Alice is a great place to do that. It's from the government of Alberta, but obviously very transferable. And setting yourself up on that good foundation, and then exploring some some options. So within career development, it's one thing to know what your interests and passions are, but I challenged my students to, well, see if that's going to work out. Like, is there going to be a job kind of where you're hyper focused to go? And so I put into the chat a website, worksica.com. And I think that that's a really cool place to just explore a little in terms of industry trends. You can put in an occupation, or you can put even a skill set. Like I put in data analysis to see where it goes. And then they give you kind of a picture of skill sets and occupations, and how many job ads have been posted for something like that in the last 12 months. It's an interesting thing to check out, and it's Canadian based. So that's in the chat. And then exploring, how do you upskill? How do you continuously become a lifelong learner? I think we have a role to play in keeping our career exciting and alive and bright. and part of that is by not allowing ourselves to kind of um, just fall flat. I think we have a role to play in learning a little bit, or chatting with new people within our organization to see what's interesting and current, and just to keep kind of looking and exploring and keeping ourselves bright. And that's whether we're doing a machine operation or we're developing policy. Like it doesn't matter where you are and what type of career, it's always valuable to continuously be exploring options to keep it relevant for self or relevant for your changing values or lifestyles. Getting focused, those decision making, goal setting, action planning, um, continuously evaluating and having something you're working on, I think will continue to advance your career. And this is whether you're looking to find that entry level position or whether you're trying to pursue your way up to the CEO. I think we can constantly have those short-term and medium-term goals that is something that we're building on to continue to advance ourselves. And then lastly, take action. So continuously gain experience, continuously networking. That has come up between Christy and Janet. I love the idea of informational interviews. And if you would like more information, I know PLT Canada has a webinar that we did with Eco Canada on informational interviewing and networking. But I think it's a tool that wasn't previously taught as much as it should be, but it's just that idea of feeling like you can call an organization and learning more about that organization, or call someone within your network or a contact of your network, and just having like a cup of coffee or what have you, to just say, hey, what do you love about your job? What do you love about the company you work for? What skills do you think I could work on? It doesn't have to be it's not an actual interview, it's just a chat. But I think being able to have that information allows you to make some really informed choices with your own career pathway, not what someone else is doing, but yours, and kind of reflect it back onto that, knowing yourself. Is that going to work for your values? Is that organization sound like a good fit for you? So I'll leave it at that. I hope that that's what you were looking for. I'm happy to take questions. If folks are looking for more resources, I certainly have more sites to do assessments or to look at decision making and what have you. But I want to leave you with just that reminder that you have this beautiful career ahead of you, but you get to choose what it is. And honor yourself, honor your own bundles, and hopefully your natural fire burns brightly for a long time. So thanks, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Well, Tara, before that, I
Yes.
want to say that you had started off by saying you were so happy to have been asked to do this, and you wondered, whether you had the skills and so on and so forth. I can see exactly why you were asked. Before we take questions, I do want to ask if Mary has anything to add. You are a fellow panelist, Mary, and I just want to give you the opportunity to either comment on or add anything to what Tara has said. And then we will definitely, Amy, I know we're really, really pressing on time. So Mary, if you can just say a few things perhaps, and then we'll open it up.
I don't have anything to add at this point. I'm mindful of the
I
time
did have
and just would love to go to questions.
Well, I
Okay,
did have
that's-
a specific question that came up that Jody Joy put in the chat, Janet, and others, if you want to unmute and ask questions too, or put them in the chat, which was around, I think is a Mary question, around imposter syndrome, because we all get hit with that every so often of like, oh crap, so I'm taking this big risk and now I'm in it and they're going to find out I don't know what I'm doing. How do you coach people through that? I think that's a good Mary question, maybe.
I think women especially suffer from imposter syndrome. And I think it goes back to feeling like we have to be master and commander on day one. So, I've seen leaders show weakness. I've seen leaders raise questions about their own competencies, wanting to draw on other members of the team, being true to say, I'm strong in this area, but I want to collaborate over here. And I think it's a great, it's a great perspective to take to heart for everybody out there, is that we don't come fully loaded. We come partially loaded with a huge desire to learn. So I would just say, use your learning opportunities openly and fully. And by saying, I don't know, you know, the imposter syndrome over time, with the right kind of workplace culture, can start to go away a little bit.
Great. Thank you very
Faye.
much. Thank you very much. I think that's a great addition to all of the thoughts here, for sure. For sure. So as Janet said, we need to start to wrap up. We did want to offer, for folks who want to stick around, the opportunity to jump into a breakout room. And this webinar has been recorded, as you would have been told by Zoom that was happening, and it will be on the platform with other resources. We do have an assessment coming out, I believe, and we want people to take a quick minute to fill that out. And I just want to reiterate how grateful we are to Jody and Shazray, who really do pull this off. The rest of us give some brain space and a bit of time, but they're maintaining the program and making sure everybody's included and involved in a really caring and professional and successful way. So thank you again for that. And Janet, I'm going to turn it back over to you to get us started on these breakouts, and thank our panel.
Yeah, I don't know whether people are going to want to, but let's, in any case, let's do that. Amy, are you going to do that?
Yep, I've got it set up, and I'll let everyone go for what, about 10 minutes or so? Is that enough time? And then
Yeah, I think
bring us
so.
back?
And I think so. And I think because I think Mary has to get to another commitment, we will just take a minute. Are you okay, Mary, to stick around for a few
Yeah,
minutes?
I'd like to talk to some people who've been
Awesome.
participating. So
Awesome.
I'll
Okay,
stick around.
great. Fantastic. Yeah. So let it happen. Amy, to us. All right. Are we back?
I think everybody's back.
Very cool. It was like a total cliffhanger. We were just getting to some really juicy bits and we came back, but we knew we had to come back.
Christy and Amy, I have to head out, but really enjoyed this.
Thank you so much, Mary.
Yeah.
The benefits of your wisdom were very much felt in this community today.
Well, thank
Absolutely.
you. It was fun conversation. So take care. All the best, everyone.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Great to connect.
Well, I think we just wanted to remind everyone who needs to re-access this, and we'll obviously send this around, that they can access it. But Janet, do you want to say some words in closing?
Well, I mean, I thank those people with whom I was in the little chat room. And once again, I want to thank you, particularly Christy, and everybody at Pollinate Networks. It's we could not have done this without you, Nora, Jody, everybody at Nature Canada, the panelists for sure. It was so interesting to hear from you, Tara. Thank you so very much, and the best of luck.
Thank you.
And you know, I think you know, we're going to see some of these people as our emerging leaders, and I can't thank you enough. I've learned so much through my participation in these webinars and from mentoring. And so thank you very much, and pay attention to what's on the screen. Fill out your final online evaluation.
We really do listen. We really do take all the information and make changes. So yes, exactly.
Thank you to everyone again.
Oh, thank you, Jody.
Thank you all.
Take care.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone. Bye.
Bye now.